Good night and good evening, and thank you for joining us this evening for devotionals. Wanted to share a little bit from Living the Message, Eugene Peterson's devotional, and this is one of those I kind of look around, trying to find, what are things that we should share, and spent most of the day in meetings and kind of working on notes and working in my head, trying to bring things together and really appreciate the opportunities to work collaboratively with folks. And yet there's just a lot to try to hold in the mind and in the heart as we're trying to figure out, how do we care for each other? How do we do ministry in these days? Which is somewhat comforting. We're all asking those questions, whether we're ministry leaders or part of a church community. And so I wanted to share this. This just happened to be the devotional for today. And maybe you'll get a kick out of it. But I think it applies not just to pastors. Eugene Peterson is writing, I think, in a sense, you'll hear he's talking to folks in ministry. But I think there's a sense in which this applies to all of our lives. And so the devotional is entitled, Work in the Particulars. When I work in the particulars, I develop a reverence for what is actually there instead of a contempt for what is not. Inadequacies that seduce me into a covetousness for someplace else. A farm, Wendell Berry contends, is a kind of small-scale ecosystem, everything working with everything else in certain rhythms and proportions. The farmer's task is to understand the rhythms and the proportions, and then to nurture their health. Not bullyingly, to invade the place and decide that it's going to function on the farmer's rhythms and according to the size of the farmer's ego. If all a farmer is after is profit, they will not be reverential of what is actually there, but only greedy for what they can get out of it. The parallel with my parish could not be more exact. I substitute my pastoral vocabulary for Barry's agricultural and find Barry urging me to be mindful of my congregation, in reverence before it. These are souls, divinely worked on souls, whom the Spirit is shaping for eternal habitations. Long before I arrive on the scene, the Spirit is at work. I must fit into what is going on. I have no idea yet what is taking place here. I must study the contours, understand the weather, know what kinds of crops grow in this climate, and be in awe of the complex intricacies between past and present, between the people in the parish and those outside. And he cites 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 9 and the first part of 10. Be quick to give a meal to the hungry, a bed to the homeless, cheerfully. Be generous with the different things that God gave you, passing them all around so that all get in on it. And, obviously for me at least in ministry, the connection was, very immediate as to how do we approach the tasks, the people, the situations we find ourselves in. And it's, I would say not so much one of exploitation, but a sense of control. How do we both carry the vision forward that God's given us? And I believe, and here's where I want to try to invite us all into that conversation, is that God gives us all vision of what life is meant to be like, what community is meant to be like, what the community of faith, the church body, is meant to be like. And as Dietrich Bonhoeffer cautions, we need to be careful that our vision of community doesn't end up destroying that community in the attempt to force it, in the attempt to act without understanding, to speak without having listened. And I just invite us to think about that, in whether it's in our personal lives or whether it's in our connections as part of a community, the various communities that we're a part of, our friendships, being part of the church. What I hear in that, and maybe just invite us to ponder, is what does it mean for us to take the time to study the contours of one another's lives? What's actually going on? How do we listen and try to approach the task humbly? It doesn't mean God hasn't given us a sense of the longing or the striving or the sense of this is what we're being called to. But in the midst of those convictions and the vision that God has given each of us. How do we do that together? How do we do that mindful of one another's journey, one another's background? Because when we do that, I believe it creates the opportunities for us to hear and experience and see more of what God's done. One of the exciting things today that Gabriel noticed and shared, and I had to go outside at lunchtime and see for myself, is she noticed that our apple trees, which did absolutely nothing last year, which was the first year that we got a chance to see them, uh, now both of which have tiny little beginnings of apples beginning to grow. And it was thrilling, to see here again, promise of new life consistently in the parable. Jesus promises there's a harvest coming, and the harvest coming for those who are a part of the kingdom, who are receptive to what God is doing. And so, how might we join in that together? Wherever you're at on the journey, may God be with you and bless you today and in all the days to come. Thank you, and God bless.